2024 marks 40 years of the Austin Montego, so we thought we should probably take one for a drive again. After all, it's been a while. The Montego was the first car I drove after passing my test, so we actually have between us quite a lot of nostalgia for the Montego, which we're going to cover in a separate video over on the Hub Notes channel a day or two after this video comes out. Montego, hugely important car for Austin Rover. It wasn't without fault, but it was actually a very, very good rival to cars such as the Ford Sierra and the Vauxhall Cavalier. They were the big two at the time. The Montego, some way behind in third, but I think actually a really, really good family car. And this one being the Estate with 7 seats, oh yes, even better still. So we'd like to give a shout out to John Ashford at this point, because it was he who created the Estate version of the Montego, but the styling was heavily impacted by the fact this car is based on the Maestro. So the Maestro came first, that was Project LM10. LM11 was the Montego, and because it shares that basic structure with the Maestro, we've got these scalloped sides, and the styling caused much argument and debate both within the company and outside, but I think it's happiest in the Estate form. It suits it particularly well, and it kind of looks like it was always designed to be an Estate. And you even get mildly ribbed rear lights to tie it in with the saloon, but yeah, it's just really nice. It's quite strange seeing one without the roof bars. They all seem to have the roof bars back in the day, but this C-Reg 1.6 HL is an astonishing survivor. Moving inside, it is a world of brown. It's just into that era where interiors were very colour-coded. Even the plastic is brown. Later it would kind of be a sort of a greyish colour, certainly the one my dad had. But this is still the earlier dashboard. We've got the heater controls all tucked away down here, little graph paper emblem, the column stalks shared with the Metro, so you got the lights there, and I don't know if it's not going to be dark enough to tell, but there's fibre optics to make the stalks light up, which is exceptionally cool. Montego badge to remind you you're in a Montego, and something I love on this one, we've got an econometer, so when it goes red you got your foot down too hard, and when you're green you're all good. We've got an older style stereo cassette player. We've got the cassette storage. What do we got? Now that's what I call music 12. That sounds very, very appropriate. No power steering. Really clear, concise dials ahead of you that you'll recognise from LDV vans and Metros, Discoveries even. It's very much the same sort of layout. Proper indicator noise. And we get the little caravan light flashing as well. They actually built the light in, so when you got your tow trailer hitched up, that'll flash with the indicators as well. But yeah, it's just really nice to be back. We got, I think, an aftermarket roof, or maybe it was an optional extra. Later ones had a proper tilt slide sunroof, but this robs less headroom out of the car. And being a HL, we've got these huge head restraints on the rear seats, or maybe that was part of the 7-seat package. I don't know, but obviously this isn't the position I'm most familiar with. I would have done most of my travelling in a Montego in the back, so we'll go and have a look at that. I spent many miles travelling in the back of a Montego. I don't remember the door shutting quite so nicely, but yeah, a lot of time sat here with my sisters squabbling next to me, and loads of space. Look at the amount of leg room I've got. There's plenty of room for the knees alert back here. I'd forgotten just how spacious they are. Certainly better than the Sierra. My dad also had a Sierra, and that was definitely more squashed in the rear, not helped by having the larger transmission tunnel for a transmission. Being a HL, as well as the mini vacuum cleaner the owner has left in here, that's beautiful. We get a centre armrest as well. Didn't get that luxury in the 1.6L. But again, it's an absolute feast of brown. But yeah, nice, light, airy. This is quite a pleasant place to sit. I've even got enough headroom because there is no sunroof. Excellent. Moving into the rear, most seats Struts are feeling a little tired perhaps, but we've got the spare wheel is stored here. So normally it would be a flat floor, but we've got the 7 seats active. Now of course I'm probably a bit big for them these days. Yes, I am definitely too big for them, but I love how there's these rails to hold the upper seatbelt mount. And for a child, it's probably not too bad back here. It feels a little cozy, but it's always a bit weird when you were following one of these down the road and there's children just staring back at you. It was always slightly unnerving. But the ironic thing is, of course, despite us being a family of 6 and Miss Hubnut's family being 6 when they had a Montego, neither of us had this. This is the first time I've sat in the back of a Montego. So I think where the Montego hides its Maestro origins most successfully is at the front. This is quite a different front end. We've got the concealed windscreen wipers, an extended snout, which isn't really to make engine access any better. It just gives a different line, along with a slightly longer wheelbase and more overhangs on the saloons. It really did differentiate it from the Maestro. But the styling was tweaked for production by Roy Axe, who just joined British Leyland, as was, turning into Austin Rover just before the Maestro came out. He was unable to do a thing to the Maestro, but he did do little things like just like the way the indicator goes into the side moulding here. If you go to the excellent aronline.co.uk website and look for the Maestro Montego development story, it'll cover all this in vastly more detail. But yeah, Paul Roy Axe couldn't do very much with the Montego. He was later more successful with cars like the Rover 800 and had previously designed the Chrysler Alpine hatchback. Oh, I should also point out you can actually put a Montego front on a Maestro and create your own Monstro. A few people did it back in the day, including the Chinese. When Chinese started building the Maestro under license, they put the Montego front end on them just to make them look different. Before we go for a test drive, there's a wiper test, and obviously it's quite interesting wipers on a Montego. They're hidden down there, you wash the windscreen, and up they pop, and they don't go back down until they've finished wiping. There they go, and then they park off the screen. Pleased to film that, because the first Montego we tried, the wipers didn't work properly. But there you go, that's the running position, and then that makes them park off the screen. Now the rear wiper fascinated me because it's got the jets built in, so you can spray everywhere. In fact, we're spraying everywhere but the rear window really, but lovely clear wiping pattern, very successful. Now I have to say, we've got the engine running, and you can hear stuff vibrating and shuddering, and that was always a bit of a problem. The build quality was just never the best, but I will temper this by saying that, to be honest, Mark II Cavaliers and Sierras were also very much built to a cost, and trim rattles very common at the time. Citroen BX, another one. I've owned enough BXs, I know what they're like. But yeah, here we go. I'm looking forward to this. So the first car I drove unsupervised was a 1.6 Montego. The 1.6 is the S series engine, and that was developed to replace the R series engine, which was really an E series engine with a timing chain. This has now got a rubber timing belt, a little bit more refined. And gear change aside, you can actually hear the linkages clunking about in there. It is a nice car, it's really comfortable, and I'm going to upset the Ford fans by saying I would take a Montego over a Sierra. I just think they're a bit more together, and the important stuff was always there. Very good ride and handling, because the Rover engineers knew how to make the best of a bad situation. They never really had the funds. Back when this car was developed, British Leyland, as was having to beg and borrow money from the government because it had been nationalised. But the government was always reluctant to release enough money, which is why, you know, Ray Axe wanted to completely ditch the styling of the Montego and go with something better, and then later developed AR6, which was a vastly facelifted version, and the government said no, and the Montego got a new grille in 1989. That was it. Oh, and the smoothed out rear lights on the saloon. But yeah, as ever, British Leyland, Austin Rover, just struggling to do the best with what they had, which was never very much. Oh no, I'm in the red. And that's our 50 miles an hour, which is the limit here. And yeah, it gathers speed nicely. There's a lovely gruff engine noise, I think, to the S series engine. The larger engine was the O series engine, which had first been seen in things like the Marina when they revamped that, and the last of the Princesses as well, into the Ambassador. And they're good engines, good strong engines. They're just mildly let down by having things like automatic chokes that don't always work 100% successfully. But we're just entering the very, very pretty town of Pershaw, so we can do a bit of town driving. And the ride is pretty compliant. It's yeah, nice to drive. It just takes me back. I remember how enormous these cars felt when I first clambered aboard one back in 1995 at the age of 17. The bonnet just seemed enormous because I jumped out of a Vauxhall Corsa, but now it just doesn't feel so big anymore. But the Montego had a heck of a job trying to compete with Ford and Vauxhall. They had got into an epic battle amongst themselves, so there was such heavy discounting that it was hard to make the Montego a sales success and actually generate a profit. We're going to go this way. Heavy manual steering. Again, that felt so heavy back in the day. And it still requires a bit of arm movement now, but yeah, memories, folks. Now, one reason they ditched things like brown interiors was they were desperate to try and get younger people into Montegos. So as well as the sporty MG versions, including the Larry Turbo, they developed cars such as the 2-litre SI. And it was kind of designed so reps could feel cool in the car park with its grey lower paintwork, red striping, and of course 2-litre engine for a bit of get up and go. Well, this just brings back so many memories. The Montego was launched in 1984 and production ended in 1994. But one of the problems really was the Montego was a bit off the pace. It was a couple of years too late. If it had come out in 82 to rival the Cavalier, the story may have been very different. But it was always hampered by the fact it looked a bit squashed in the middle because of that Maestro underpinning. But it's quite cleverly disguised. The Maestro actually has a falling glass line if you look at it, and there's heavy plastic trim on the waist of the Montego along the bottom of the windows, and that is to disguise that fact and try and hide the Maestro origins a bit. That's quite clever. I can find some more open roads to get going a little bit brisker. Oh, memories of how I drove my dad's Montego when he wasn't looking. That was nothing compared to what I got up to in his Sierra, to be fair. Sorry, Dad. They get there on the road so nicely, and there's a bit of body roll in the bends, but they're very, very competent, well-behaved cars. Something that couldn't always be said of the rear-wheel drive Sierra, of course. I think it's just a shame. I think the Montego was so close to being a really, really good car. They even got Russ Swift, the stunt driver, to do ads of them driving on 2 wheels and stuff. They really went to town in the marketing department to make the Montego cool. Not sure they ever quite managed to pull it off. Yeah, fundamentally a good car. Apparently when BMW took over Rover in 1994, they were horrified to find the Maestro Montego was still on sale and almost immediately killed off the Montego which by then was apparently being assembled in a corner of the factory down in Cowley on almost a hand-built production line. It's like it had been left in production just to give people something to do. Yes, compared to what came before in World of British Leyland, namely the Ital and the Ambassador, this was just leagues ahead. This feels like a normal car, which is what most people want, and it's certainly what fleet buyers want. The fleet buyers buying, you know, a huge fleet of cars for their company car drivers want something that's nice and standard, easy to fix, and not too expensive. And that's where cars like the Ambassador, with its hydrogas suspension and sort of in-sump gearbox, which limited it to only a 4-speed gearbox, did not find favour. The Montego was way better in that regard. I mean, the 1.6, not the most powerful. The 2-litre EFIs were the ones. They went very nicely. And then, of course, the Perkins Prima diesel engine option also transformed the Montego's fortunes. But it was all a little bit too late. By the time the diesel engines came in '88, the Montego was quite near the end of its life. And with the arrival of the Ford Mondeo in 1993, the Xantia in 1992, the Montego really was looking a generation too old. So very close to being a very successful car, but once again, not quite. There we go, folks. That was the Austin Montego, driving another one in 2024, struggling to believe it's 40 years since the Montego came out. Wonderful. I know people who went to Festival of the Unexceptional. They had the very last Montego produced, a saloon signed by all the employees. So that was a lovely touch. That's usually kept at the British Motor Museum, which is where you can find Rustival 2. So don't forget to go to Rustival 2. It's being organised by Hubnut, Furious Driving, and iDriver Classic. How convenient is that? But yeah, thoroughly enjoyed this test drive. Huge thanks to the owner for letting us drive this beautiful example. Don't forget you can head to the Hubnut store and buy lovely merchandise if that is your wish. Otherwise, a like and a share is free. So thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you in a future video. Farewell. Montego.